Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm Islam Hassan, a coordinator to this year's conference. On the behalf of the Middle Eastern Studies Student Association, I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. Tonight, we're honored to have you all here in our opening ceremony of the second annual Undergraduate Conference. Today, we have a full schedule, and we're going to start with the opening speech by Haya Al-Thani and Ghada Sibai. Please welcome them on the stage.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Distinguished guests, faculty, fellow students, and MESSA participants, good evening. On behalf of the entire Middle Eastern Studies Student Association Committee, I welcome you to the launch of our second annual Middle Eastern Conference. My name is Haya Al-Thani, and I'm glad to be standing in front of you here today. As some of you already know, MESSA is a completely student-run initiative that strives to create a forum for the dialogue and discussion in issues pertaining to the Middle East. We have received some excellent paper this year from topics ranging from women and Nahda to the socio-economic transformation of Iran and even the media war in Syria. The topics that were selected are almost as diverse as the participants themselves, each representing their own background, culture, and point of view. Being in the Middle East, especially in such times of turmoil and instability, debate, discussion, and cooperation have never been more vital. And that is precisely what we try to achieve here in this conference today. This year's conference would have not been made possible if not for the complete support and assistance that was provided to us by Georgetown University through the two incredible student development officers, Alex and Jackie, our logistics manager, Afsha, and most importantly, the wonderful faculty members who have given us nothing but encouragement and support throughout the entire process. A special thanks goes to Professor Mehran Kamrava for being here with us today and for taking time out of his very busy schedule, not to mention the Iranian New Year's, to be with us. We are also very excited for Sarah Ahmed to be here today. She is a Middle Eastern activist who has dedicated her entire career to bringing about positive change in the region. Thank you all once again for joining us, and please enjoy your night, and we look forward to your attendance and participation throughout the next couple more days of the conference.
Thank you, Haya. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ghada Sibai. My 4 years at Georgetown taught me a lot of things, but most importantly, it taught me the value of research, knowledge, and continuous learning. And this is exactly what MESSA is about. It is about enhancing research culture, creating knowledge, and a platform for dialogue and intellectual growth among students from all over the world. This year, we have 26 participants from different countries and different backgrounds and different universities, but they all have one thing in common: their passion for Middle Eastern studies. MESSA allows students an opportunity to share their academic work with peers and professors. Today, we are very excited to celebrate the second annual Undergraduate Conference on Middle Eastern Affairs. MESSA, as a student association, has grown a lot since last year, and I am confident that it will continue to grow. It took a lot of time, effort, patience, and passion to make this conference happen. As a team, we have been working for 4 months to make a conference that is a representation of just what we learn at Georgetown. Standing here in front of you and seeing the passion and diversity of participant and audience in this room makes it all worth it. MESSA also aims to not only hold an annual undergraduate conference, but also to publish its first undergraduate academic journal. This will allow us as students to share our contribution and to grow intellectually, so the work could be preserved and shared with a wider audience even beyond these walls. It gives me great joy and pride to be part of a university that fosters a genuine sense of understanding and dialogue at all levels. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're honored to have one of our most inspiring professors at Georgetown participating in MESSA 2013 opening ceremony. He's the director of the Center of Arab and of the Regional International Studies. He's also the author of a number of books, including Iran's Intellectual Revolution, The Modern Middle East, A Political History Since the First World War. He also edited The New Voice of Islam, Rethinking Politics and Modernity, and he co-edited the 2-volume work of Iran Today, the Encyclopedia of Life in the Islamic Republic of Iran. The professor that I personally have been and still learning a lot from him, Dr. Mehran Kamarava.
Thank you, Islam, Gada, and Haya, officers of MESSA, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you tonight. As you know, oftentimes I say professors don't earn much. Our rewards are in seeing our students excel and progress, and it is indeed a pleasure for me to see our students put together such a wonderful conference, and I look forward to the next couple of days. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I wanted to share a few thoughts with you on what I have experienced and what I have seen over the last couple of years. In particular, what we have all witnessed over the last year and a half, over the last 2 years. A few years ago, back in 2004, long before there was ever any talk of an Arab Spring, I was traveling across the Middle East in order to do research for one of my books. And in doing research for this book, I met and interviewed people from all walks of life in various countries of the region. And across the region, when I met people, 2 questions kept coming up. One actually was a question that people would ask me, and the other was a question that I would ask of them. I would ask people how they saw the future. What was their lives, what were their lives like today, and how they envisioned them in the days to come. And interestingly, a lot of the people I met and a lot of the people I interviewed would ask me a question. They would say, what would you say is the future, is the key to the success of the future? What would you think we need to do in order to succeed tomorrow? Now, when I asked people about their future, they would give me a whole litany of complaints. When I asked them about their lives, what they saw, what they imagined in their lives, people would complain about the high prices. People would complain about the fact that the fat cats were the ones only getting the jobs. They would complain about the high cost of living. They would complain that it was too expensive to buy a house or too expensive to even get married. And after a while, it was so dispiriting that I stopped asking. I was getting really depressed. Interestingly, people often asked me what I thought was the key to success. And I gave this some thought. And I always, after some thought, pointed to the young. I'll tell them oil is going to run out. It's not as if the Middle East is going to have oil. It's not as if the Middle East has a robust and a vibrant industrial base and is able to become an exporter of manufactured goods. But what the Middle East does have for it is human resources. What it does have for it is the potential and the energies of the young. And oftentimes when I said this, there was a look of disbelief. People thought I was just being polite for saying this. But I did tell them that the key to the Middle East future success is in its human resource. It's in the ability of the young to take charge of their own destiny, to realize their potentials, those potentials that regimes kept stifling, and to usher in a new future. In one of the meetings I had with a group of the young, it was actually at the University of Tehran in the early 2000s, something that a group of people said to me stuck in my mind, and some of you have heard me say this story and have read about it. One of the groups that I met said to me something that resonated with me, struck a deep chord. They said, look, our father's generation suffered, and our generation, they said, is sacrificing today. But tomorrow is bright. Tomorrow, they said, will bring with it a new day. As was just mentioned, as you know, spring is upon us. And today marks the first full day of the Iranian New Year. The New Year in Farsi is called Nowruz, which literally translates into new day. Today in the Middle East is a new day. It's a new day that started actually in the dead of winter, in November and December of 2010, but brought with it a spring. It brought with it that promise of a new day. It brought with it that promise of a new day that I heard about on the campus of University of Tehran. That new day started in Sidi Bouzid and in Tunis. It started in Cairo and Alexandria. It started in Benghazi and Tripoli, and it's happening today in Dera and Aleppo and Damascus, and it happened in Sana'a and in Aden, where the young took charge of their own destiny in 2010-2011, where they braved the repression and fury of oppressive regimes, where they yearned for and called for a new era, and where they brought down some of the Middle East's most wily and repressive of men. And today, right here with us, we have one of those who made all of this happen, who was there front and center, mobilizing and organizing, who was the voice and the face of the new day, and who is the hope of tomorrow. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Ahmed Jamal.
Good evening. It's such a pleasure to be here. Simply because I always feel home in a place that is full of books, and we're surrounded by books that not only are printed, but also living within our hearts. I think all of you are full of books that are to be written in the future of all the experiences that we've all lived. As you know, I come from Yemen, and for those, since it's the topic of the hour in Yemen, which part of Yemen? I was born for parents from the south, but I was born and raised in Sana'a. Long story short, I'm one of those people who are looking for an identity in Yemen. So I try to cling to a bit from here and a bit from there in my clothing whenever I represent my country. So I would get a scarf from the south and tie it with another scarf from the north and get another piece from the middle. And then there's this combination of crazy colors that you see today, bounded by the Jewish silver heritage of the Yemeni Jews who made the most beautiful silver ever. The first time I said the word irhal or leave wasn't in 2011 or 2010. It was in the 10th grade, and I was barely 15. And the reason was that it was a history class, and the teacher was teaching us about the accomplishments of former President Saleh. And the book listed a very long list of 25 accomplishments. And I happened to sit on the back then, and I opened my window and I looked at the street, and I couldn't find half of the accomplishments that were supposed to be on the street. And I raised my hand and I asked a question about, how come we have all those accomplishments in the book, but I don't really see them when I open the window behind me. And the teacher did not answer me, and I said, fine, if you don't have an answer, I think I have an answer. It's because this president whose picture is on the cover of the book is a thief. I was 15, hormones, teens. I forgot that the president's granddaughter was sitting next to me. And, I mean, it was too late. I mean, by the time I noticed, it was really too late. And then she started crying and yelling at me and telling me that her grandfather is the person who freed the country from colonialism, and he's the person who united both parts of the country. He did this, he did that. It was a long argument. Long story short, next morning, a very important military leader from the family came to the principal's office, and he came up to class to ask 15-year-old me to apologize. Back then, I mean, this was 2004, and it wasn't really easy to say everything. So I was really stuck between the idea of me, the girl who comes from a middle-class family, who might jeopardize her parents' job, and the rented house that we have. We still don't have a house. And the idea that I do not want to apologize because I really do think that the guy was a thief. So in order for me to get out of the dilemma, I quoted Palestinian poet Ibrahim Touqan, who said in Arabic, في يدينا بقية من بلاد فاستريحوا كي لا تضيع البقية. We still have bits of a country, so take a rest so that we don't lose what's left. Well, the illiterate president's relative did not understand what I was saying, so he thought it was an apology. I got rid of it. 2011 happened. January 15th, I found myself watching television. It was 2 in the morning. I called a couple of friends and I set a Facebook event to go and protest in front of the Tunisian embassy. I wasn't planning anything. I wasn't even, none of us was planning anything. And then I found us in front of the Tunisian embassy on the morning of January 15th. We were 15 women and almost 7 men. Yes, the majority was women. And yes, we were chanting and men were chanting behind us. And then when the parliament member on behalf of the Socialist Party was arrested on that day, a friend of mine, a Yemeni activist, if she can see me now, I'd like to say hello. Her name is Bilqis al-Lahabi. She stood in front of the police jeep, and she told them, if you want to take him, you have to run over me first. And I would like you to remember this scene as I'm taking you on this journey with me. And then we found ourselves chanting against the regime, wanting to overthrow the regime. The process was not the same. This is how it began, but it wasn't the same. I was asked today to speak about activism. And the first thing that came up to my mind was 10th grade, January 15th, 2011, and then a quote that I read about this clergyman who lived before the Nazi period and then continued during the Nazi period in Germany. His name is Martin Niemöller. In his memoirs, he said, "First, they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me." This is how I felt at the beginning of 2011. I felt that I had the privilege to graduate. I was a fresh graduate who just got a BA in philosophy and sociology. And I was very proud. I was one of the very few people in my country who were proud to call themselves feminists. And I thought, you know, I should speak out. And we had the most utopian month, which was February. And why do I call it utopian? Because for the first time in my life as a Yemeni, I saw a small community of the civil state that I was dreaming of. It was a square that had tribesmen, tribeswomen, men and women together, people who dressed differently, people who had different religious beliefs, people who had different political affiliations. they kind of coexisted, and which was rare in a country that was torn by so many civil conflicts. And it kind of proved my point that the problem is not in my people. The problem is in the regime that has always used divide and conquer in order to, prosper and continue. And then, and as we are in March, the utopian state did not continue because on March 18th, I had to crawl from the tent I was in to the field hospital to count the bodies one after another. They reached 48 bodies on March 18th, on the day of Karama, or the Friday of Dignity, when there were snipers shooting peaceful protesters while praying. There were over 500 people who were injured, and some of them died later. There were kids who were shot and injured. That's the day I buried my first friend. And, I did not cry, and I was shocked. And I thought I was brave, but I wasn't. It's the adrenaline. People think they're brave when they see the bullets and the shelling, and they're not crying and they're not scared. But that's not true. We're all scared. It's the adrenaline. And then we write poetry, and we compose music to make sense out of it, to tell ourselves and to tell each other that we're brave, but deep down inside we're shaking and we're really scared. But it was just the beginning. 3 days later, March 21st, I remember myself giving my first zaghruda, that noise that we Arabs make in weddings. It was during the burial of the martyrs of the Friday of Dignity, and it was my way to celebrate their lives. And I didn't know that a few hours later, the president's relative and his partner in all his crimes for 33 years, General Ali Mohsen al-Ahmar, joined the revolution. And he bashed all our peaceful struggle against the wall to bring half of the army to the square to protect the revolution and to protect the upcoming theocracy they were planning to establish. It was the day like today, and it was an hour like this one when I sat and I thought that, okay, this is what did I get myself into? I thought it was going to be, Tunisians did it in days, and then Egyptians did it in weeks. And I thought it was going to be one more week and khalas, and we're done and it's over. But it wasn't as planned as Egyptians and Tunisians. It seems that Yemenis were special. And then the sociologist in me popped out. I remembered Max Weber, who said that sociology is the science of questioning the obvious. And then I wrote something down on that day. I wrote, most of the time the obvious can easily be taken for granted. Most of the time people are more comfortable taking their surroundings for granted. And even when they can't, they would fake it till they make it. But some people can't. Some people question the obvious and start drawing lines for what they can and cannot take. But even then, what is it that makes a person question, doubt, draw a line, pick a cause and stand for it? I know that most of you would probably answer the question with abstract vocabulary like passion, faith, love, strength, etc. And yes, this might be true. But wait a minute. Are all those who fight for causes the same? Don't you think that some chose and some simply found themselves in the middle of all of that? And who knows if they would have chosen to become activists had they had the choice? Do we really choose to become activists? Sometimes you just find yourself in the middle of chaos and you want to make sense out of it, just like poetry and music. You want to create heroes and martyrs just to make it sound as honorable as you want it to sound. But the reality is that death is really ugly. On September 18th, I marked the death of my 10th friend. So the total was 10, but I also had to leave my house with my family because the area was under shelling. It wasn't the rebels fighting, no. Even though, yes, we own 11 million pieces of weapons. By we, I mean civilians, not the army. Yes, we all know how to use Kalashnikovs, men and women. And yes, we learn how to use them when they're 7, but we left them at home and we did not use them. Other Arab countries went on peaceful protests, but they didn't have the choice a war because they did not have weapons, but we have tribes that own RPGs and dushkas at home, and they left them, and they send their kids to die. But I left my house in September because of the shelling that was between the Republican Guards and the 1st Armored Division that came to protect the revolution. So peaceful protests and houses would come out of 2 traditional forces fighting on power, forgetting about the demands and the dream of a civil state and social justice. By the death of my 10th friend, who was, by the way, a journalist, he was a cameraman, and this is why I have a thing for cameramen and women. Every time I see them, I feel this urge to salute them because, you know, we've lost a lot of journalists in 2011. By his death, and by leaving my house and becoming displaced for 3 months, still did not cry. I found myself on the radio with Moncarlo, and the interviewer asked me a lot of mechanical questions, so I was able to describe, you know, how many people died, the bullets, everything, geography. But then she asked me a very difficult question back then. She said, "Are you scared?" And I said, "I'm not scared of death, I'm scared of getting used to it." There's a famous quote by Elie Wiesel. It says, "The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The opposite of art is not ugliness, it's indifference. The opposite of faith is not heresy, it's indifference. The opposite of life is not death, it's indifference." I was afraid of reaching a place where it becomes okay for me to see dead people. And unfortunately, it did happen at some point. Activism for me in 2011 was overthrowing the regime. I thought it would happen in 2 weeks and then we will live happily ever after. It didn't. And for those who managed to kick out their presidents easily, it still did not mean overthrowing the regime. By the end of September, my friends and I were really desperate. We were afraid of a civil conflict. The region interfered in a horrible way. They supported the 2 military powers until they made us prone a civil war, a possible civil war. In order to save us, they created the GCC initiative. And in November, I had to see political powers, both regime and opposition, who ruled for 33 years on TV, signing a piece of paper. And I felt that our tears, blood, and sweat was being sprayed on that initiative. And I realized that protests are not going to work anymore because the street is fed up. This is when my friends and I started a media campaign called Support Yemen. On March 18th this year, we did not go to commemorate the victims of Karama. Instead, our government chose that day to start the National Dialogue. The National Dialogue is a step of the GCC initiative. Support Yemen, the media campaign that we started, worked on several videos that you can, I welcome you to follow the progress of the media campaign on our website, supportyemen.org. But our latest production was a short video on the National Dialogue that's going to introduce me to my next point. Michael, if you could please play the video.
لا ما في شيء. مشاكل قطع طرق عدم عمل كل شيء يعني لا صحة لا تربية لا يعني من سيء إلى أسوء هذا اللي يجري.
ممكن نوصل لمفترق كل شيء يفك أسوأ من الأحسن أو الأسوأ. هذا أعتقد يعتمد على مؤتمر الحوار اللي يقام.
ومقياس مدى جدية الدول الداعمة لهذا الموضوع بإيجاد حل لهذا.
ممكن يكون كويس وكل شيء يمشي كويس بعد. ممكن يكون في مشكلة تحصل فيه.
أنا جدا مع إنه الأطراف كلها تبدأ تتعلم لغة الحوار، تبدأ تتعلم كيف توضع مشاكلها وتوجد لها حل. أنا جدا متفائلة.
أتوقع فشل الحوار من الآن بسبب عدم تهيئة الأجواء. الأجواء السياسية والأمنية والمدنية.
إيش رأيكم في الحوار الوطني؟
هذا رأيي ما هو حوار الوطني. ما قد سمعنا ولا قد كلمنا.
مش محاولين يتناقشوا في الحوار يقولوا قالوا لنا محاولين يتناقشوا في هذا اليوم والله أعلم.
هل سمعتوا حديث من الحوار الوطني؟
والله ما سمعنا عنه والله عارف احنا نحاول ولا.
ما رأيكم في الحوار الوطني؟
ولا المعيشة وعدم الأمن والاستقرار يعني.
زمان يتدمر النظام الاقتصادي الآن أصبح يعني أسوأ بشكل أكبر.
لا توجد فرص كافية للعمل بالنسبة للشباب.
الخطة الاستراتيجية العامة التي قامت بها البلد الآن ما تبشر أو ما فيهاش أي عامل من عوامل البناء المؤسسي الذي بيوصل الواحد لفكرة إنه ممكن يكون في بناء أو تقدم.
في دعم كثير لليمن، بس المشكلة أين بيدخل الدعم هذا؟
لم نلتمس أي دعم وصل إلى أيدي المواطنين أو أيدي الشعب أو مصلحة عامة قاموا بها.
أسمع بالدعم ولكن المشاريع لم نلقى مشاريع كثير جدا تعمل على رفع المستوى المعيشي بالنسبة للمواطن اليمني.
الطلب موجه يعني على حاجتين بس انهم يعني اهداء انه دعم الجانب العسكري بشكل عام ينفق تقريبا اكثر من 85% يعني ينفق على هذا الجانب، والجانب الثاني اللي على المؤتمرات كورش يعني ايش اللي بيستفيد منها المواطن العادي. We have seen international aid coming like so many money is coming in but we're not really seeing any change.
إنه معظم الدعم اللي بيجي لأشياء عملية أثبتت فشلها.
Okay, so this is 2 years from the revolution. People in Yemen, the real people, don't even know that there is a national dialogue going on. So what is activism now? Protests? People got used to them. People would drive next to a protest where people are being shot. I saw that in Cairo, I saw it in Tunis, I saw it in Sana'a, not during the revolutions, but after the revolutions. The regimes managed to normalize between protests and the street. They don't catch attention anymore, and they don't make a difference anymore. So now what? In Support Yemen, the campaign that my friends and I work in, we decided in September 2011 to start this campaign and not take a cent from anybody. We don't receive any aid, not local, not foreign, not governmental or non-governmental. We simply, and people thought we were crazy and we wouldn't sustain, but we sustained with a camera and a laptop. And our videos have been going viral ever since. We have videos on women's demands, the revolution demands, and now we're trying to reach the grassroots. To me, activism now basically revolves around keeping the spirit of 2011, which was keeping people's dignity up high so that we can solve the deeper issues. And unfortunately, there's a whole turn from that principle. What's happening now is that the same culture of petrodollar, the same culture of Wall Street, those capitalist regimes that supported those dictators for years are now supporting the rebels. How are they supporting them? Simply by co-opting them with all this money to take them from what they were fighting into hundreds of NGOs where they end up serving people's small needs instead of empowering an independent country with an independent constitution and independent economy. To me, activism today is basically trying not to save the revolution, and I hate the term, it was hijacked, no it wasn't, but trying to continue the cycle of evolution, because for me the revolution has not started yet. One uprising began, but many are still on the way. And at the age of 25, I find myself saying what I said when I was 15. في يدينا بقية من بلاد فاستريحوا كي لا تضيع البقية. We still have bits of a country, so take a rest so that we don't lose what is left. And thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Sarah. That was terrific. You gave a lot of us a lot of food for thought, as well as inspiration and some guidance. In a minute, we'll take some questions from the audience. But I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on the obligations of the individual. All of us, at some point in our lives, usually just around the age of college, when we're done with college, are trying to decide what direction we ought to take in life. And there are times when extraordinary moments happen where we can make important and consequential changes for the better, to the lives of others, as you did in Sana'a. What would you recommend to younger individuals who are looking at life post-college? How would you suggest they manage to create some sort of synchronicity between social obligation and the demands of daily life?
Well, I think it's a very important question. And it's a question that a lot of people don't ask themselves. But allow me to answer the question with a question. Do we fight after people or after values? I think what can get you into a real dilemma is when you fight after a person, when you idealize one person, and then you dedicate your whole life to stick to the teachings of that person. And then you find yourself lost in the middle because that person is either dead or suddenly turned to the other side of the camp and started fighting with the enemy he or she taught you to fight against. I think if you manage to sit and have some credibility and define the values that you fight for, the values in the public space are the same values that you have in the private space. If I fight for the sake of social justice, not the person who was leading the protest, but the value that that person was calling for, then I will be able to maintain social justice in my house, in my shop, in the hospital I'm managing, in the school I'm managing, and on the street. So I think the answer remains in the values. And this is a very new concept to our culture that gave us 12 years of school teachings on how to praise and worship people, but not values.
Thank you. You also mentioned that you talked about your belief in evolution rather than revolution. Oftentimes, in moments of political repression, at times of crisis, we want to smash these idols. We want to create a new order. Can you very quickly walk us through your own transformation? Or probably you were always an evolutionary and not a revolutionary per se. Can you walk us through that, how you came to believe that evolution would be far more consequential as opposed to revolution?
Well, I mean, to be accurate, what I was talking about was that the revolution is an evolutionary process. I am a revolutionary person, and I do believe that there are historical moments that you need to, hang on to and use. But we don't create those revolutionary moments. That's the thing. It's not up to us. I mean, the dialectic process of creating that moment is an accumulation of events and pressure. It's easy to catch to the moment when it's created, but the big question is what happens after that moment is created. The spark in 2011 was beautiful. It was romantic. But what's next? What's next is George Orwell, Animal Farm. We're recreating the same system that we went against. And I think, sociologically speaking, every state has, every sort of or kind of social change has a certain number of years or decades in order for it to be established. For me, I think 2011 was not the process of creating a state or social change. It was simply the spark for people to break the silence. And this is why our slogan in Support Yemen is Break the Silence. But that's it. The whole thing in 2011 was about breaking the silence. But none of the 12 goals that we had was established. I mean, not even Saleh. Saleh was not kicked out. Saleh was given an amnesty by the GCC initiative for his 33-year-old crimes. Nobody can sue him anymore. I mean, we presented a horrible example for history. What can I teach my kids when I have them? You can kill and steal for 33 years, and then the region and the world are going to celebrate you and give you immunity. In order for us not to fall into that circle of depression, we need to believe in evolution.
Perfect. I'll ask questions after I ask you one more question, one last question. Where do you see Yemen in 10 years?
That's a difficult question. I was applying for my master's 2 months ago, and one school asked me that question, so I dropped it and I replaced it with another school.
I'm sure it wasn't Georgetown.
No, it wasn't. It was a Swedish school. But 10 years from now, I really can't. I mean, there are times when they cut the electricity from our streets for 48 hours, and I wake up in the morning and I don't find any tap water, and I hear of another friend who was shot randomly. There are times when I see Yemen 10 years from now as, I see a horrible scenario. But then I recall what happened in 2011. The region and the world are having wars on our land. There are two major powers who are fighting on our land. They're using different names for it. Sometimes it's a sect, sometimes it's the religion itself, sometimes it's political parties. But the soul of the people every day, the bakers, the workers, the farmers that I see on the street every day, those people who refused to fight in 2011 gives me hope. So I think the future of Yemen in 10 years, if I continue working with a lot of people on unions and on getting this unorganized labor force organized, I think we're going to be able to be as twice economically sufficient from now. That's my main goal for the next 10 years.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your thoughts and insights.
Thank you.